Welcome to the grand finale of the Fall Great Parenting Show. This is Jacqueline Green. I'm your host, and in case you're joining us for the first time, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here. And just a super quick introduction, I've been a parenting educator for over 15 years, and I got the idea to start the show because there are so many fabulous experts out there and fabulous perspectives that I know as a parent you are so busy, and it's really challenging to find the time to hunt down and really find who the best of the best are. So that's my job, it's my pleasure, and I've been doing this for 5.5 years now. And I will introduce you in just a second to our fantastic special guest today. But just before I do, I want to say a couple things that I say each and every time. And one of them is to remind you to approach all of the parenting interviews, all the advice that you hear on the show from the perspective of being your child's expert. Now, of course, we wouldn't respect an expert who didn't take the time to get the training that they needed, but ultimately you know what's best and what will work best in your family. So I want you to always approach everything from that place. Couple quick technical things. One is I'm asking you each and every time now to think of one thing you'll do differently as a result of listening to this interview today, because it's really important that we not only get inspired, but we then take some action. So please think about that, and towards the end of the interview I will ask you about that. Please enter in the chat, and great, I see lots of people are doing it already. Love to know where you're from. And if you have any spontaneous sharings you want to do too about this fall season and some of what you've loved, we'll talk more. We're going to have some bonus replays coming up and things like that. So we're not completely done, but this is our last formal show for the fall season. So now to introduce Rachel Stafford is the hands-free mama, and her topic today is Hands-Free Mama, a life with more love, presence, and peace. Oh, and Rose just muted and hid herself. Rose is doing technical support as usual. Thank you, Rose. Rachel is a certified special education teacher and a New York Times best-selling author of Hands-Free Mama and Hands-Free Life. Through truthful storytelling and simple strategies, Rachel helps people to overcome distraction and perfection to live better and love more at handsfreemama.com. Her work has been featured on CNN, Good Morning America, Global News, Time.com, and Fox News. She loves being outdoors, baking, and doing acts of kindness with her husband and 2 daughters who inspire her daily. Welcome, Rachel, to the Great Parenting Show.
Thank you for having me. It's so good to be here.
Well, I'm so excited because you just have such a delightful perspective. So let's just dive right in. How did you become the hands-free mama expert?
Well, so about 5 years ago, I was the opposite of hands-free. I was extremely connected to my devices. I was constantly filling my schedule with things, that I felt were important, but maybe aren't so important in the grand scheme of things. I was really pressuring myself to have everything be perfect, and if anyone needed anything done in the community or the church, I was the go-to person. And so it kind of started to feel a little uncomfortable, this way of living that was really just managing life rather than living life. And I was out for a run one day, and this question kept going through my mind, which up until that point had been a really huge compliment, which was, how do you do it all, Rachel? And I thought to myself, what is the real answer to that question? And the real answer was, I can do it all because I miss out on life. I miss out on the laughing, the living, the memory making, and what I miss, I can't get back. And so I began what I called my hands-free journey that day. I knew that I couldn't transform my distracted life like completely in a day. I knew it was going to take small steps. And that very day, I had this moment with my daughter, Avery, who was just barely 4 at the time, and she was watching Lion King, and I was in the middle of, making a sandwich, thinking about all the things I needed to do that day. The phone was buzzing, the email box was dinging, And I had this little voice inside me that said, go to your child. And I thought, well, I'm in the middle of all these things, but I knew if I really, truly wanted to start changing my distracted ways, I needed to listen to that inner voice. And when I sat next to Avery, she picked up my hand and kissed my palm. And that was kind of like my confirmation that in order to grasp these moments that make life worth living, I need to let go, not just literally, but figuratively as well. And that's where the term hands-free was born. And I began doing these little changes in my life and started keeping a journal. And it ended up that I decided to share it in a blog, which some people might think, well, that's kind of interesting. You would choose an online forum when you're trying to be less distracted. But I thought, you know, if they're like me and they're really tied to their devices, that's where they're going to find this message. And as you know, with 1 million readers a month, it did turn out to be the right forum for distracted people like myself. And it's not like something you can be cured of. I constantly battle with distraction and pressure and perfection every single day, but it has been a joy to share that journey with others.
Fantastic. It's something, yes, I can relate because we've never been parenting in a more distracted time. So let's talk a little bit about, like, what exactly do you mean by hands-free? Because of course, I think many of us, when I first heard the term, I thought you were talking about cell phones, right? And how connected we are there. But describe what you mean by hands-free.
So hands-free can mean, like I said earlier, it can be a literal term, like your hands actually having things in them, and it can be figurative, meaning letting go of the things that distract you, like pressure to be and do a certain thing that, like, your neighbors are doing, or that people are telling you should live this way, or pressure to be perfect, thinking about past regrets. So whether it's your phone, your computer, your to-do list, your calendar that's maxed out, or whether it's just an internal distraction, all of those things keep you from living in the moment and being in the moment and loving wholeheartedly. And so that is where I came up with hands-free, just because in my life, I was really tied to my devices. But as I evolved in my journey, I realized my internal distractions are just as powerful and just as sabotaging as my literal devices, So living hands-free means living by heart, I think, and letting your heart be your guide and not forgetting what makes you feel alive and what your purpose is on this earth. We just get so caught up in the busyness that we forget about what makes us feel fulfilled.
It's just such a huge point, because I was thinking of how many issues are caused by that, right? Because when we're able to be present, for example, when our child's having a tantrum, and we're able to just experience what's happening, it actually can make the process of connecting and empathizing with our children dramatically easier, because then we see that they're in pain as opposed to seeing them as a problem, right? Because they're interfering with our desire to get to the next thing and be in the next moment, right? So it's just such a powerful concept. So you've talked about the catalyst being out for a run and realizing that you just really weren't learning. How do you stop putting the other people's needs ahead? Because you just described you were the go-to person, that whether it was church or whatever, whatever demand was put on you, you were responding to it, and I'm sure that was responding quickly to emails, etc. How did you start making that shift then?
Well, a very pivotal exercise for me was to figure out, what must I do before I die? And that sounds a little bit dark, but we all have things we want to accomplish. And when I sat down to write that list of what did I want to do before I died, it was not a long list. In fact, there were just two things on the list, and it was, I want to be a loving, present mother and wife, and two, I want to share the gift that I believe I was given by God, and that is to write. I wanted to share my God-given gift of writing with the world. Those were my two things. And so what happened then, when I would get a request from outside the home that would take my energy, my focus, my time, I would compare it to my list. Does it help me be a more loving and present, connected mother or wife? Does it help me share my writing gift with the world? If the answer was no, then I had to say no to that commitment. There is no way that if I had continued on that path of saying yes to everyone else, I would not know my family the way that I know them today, and I would not have written 2 books and have a blog with 1 million followers. I would not have done the things that I feel like I was born to do had I continued to give of my time and energy and focus to everyone else. So when people say, well, everyone's expecting me to do all these things, and well, someone has to run the PTA, someone has to do the book fair, someone has to do this or that, I say, if you do not protect your time and your energy, nobody is going to do it for you. And the first time I said no to an outside request, it was very hard because I always had said yes. But when they asked me to do something, I just said, I'm sorry, I'm trying to be more intentional with my time and my energy right now, and that just does not align with my goals. And the woman said, no problem. I'll find someone else to do it. And, so I thought, okay, well, the ceiling didn't fall. I didn't get electrocuted. It was like all these things that I thought were going to happen when I said no didn't happen. And there I was feeling such relief because I had protected my time and my, and maybe it's not somebody wants to do a certain job in their life, but they just want to have more time for their family. And it's hard to say no, but when you do say no, and you turn away from the outside stresses and the outside pressures, and you turn toward your family, you feel that peace of knowing you are where you need to be.
Oh, love it. So what I wanted to say about that I think is so profound is that you're saying that by saying no to the PTA request, you're instead able to actually influence and guide and support and encourage so lovingly millions.
Yes.
How's that for
exactly.
ironic? So you didn't maybe serve the hundreds potentially that you're helping through the school in that way, but you actually, even those hundreds, you've offered them your unique gift as opposed to filling that PTA spot.
That's a good point. Yes.
Well, I love that because we all struggle with that, right? And we all struggle as moms who work, whether it's inside the home and outside the home or whatever way we're working, we always struggle with when we say no to those type of things. And people are commenting that they're yes people and they really have that challenge. So wonderful. In terms of then, so you talked about, how doing that, what do I want to do before I die type of exercise really centered you. What are some other ways that you found to keep moving towards that hands-free life that, as you said, you're still working on?
Yes. A very critical exercise for me was to create designated hands-free times during the day. And for me, it worked very well to be hands-free in the morning. So instead of reaching for my phone to start my day, I did not reach for my phone, and I still don't, to have that protected time of the morning. I mean, the morning's crazy anyway when you're trying to get everyone out the door. or, whatever, getting ready for school. But to add, the phone, the email, it just draws you away from where your focus needs to be, which is on your loved ones, or even just setting yourself up for a good day. So I created these hands-free times in my day, first thing in the morning, when my children came home from school. That was also a hands-free time when I would have my phone shut off, my computer shut down, and then again at bedtime. So what happened, it's interesting because, this was 5 years ago that I began this journey, but if you were to ask me today what my hands-free times are, they are still exactly the same. And even though I have many more responsibilities now as an author and a speaker, I keep those hands-free times just protected because, I will get opportunities, and I'll never forget when NPR called me, like right when I was just starting to get my blog out there, and I had a post go viral, and NPR wanted to interview me on a Friday at 5 o'clock. And I was like, oh goodness, that's my hands-free time. What am I going to do? So I wrote back and said, I can't do it at that time because I've promised I would do something with my family. Is there another time that I can do it? And they said no. So I had to just be okay with that and realize there will be other opportunities, and that being consistent about your time that you are available to your children and your husband and the people you love, that is so rewarding, and you're never going to regret protecting that time and passing on some of the other opportunities to keep that sacred. So when people ask me, where do I start this journey to be less distracted, I say just create those hands-free times, and your hands-free times are not going to look the same as mine, depending on what your job is and what the circumstances of your life are. But when your children or your loved ones can count on my mom or my dad is always present at bedtime, that's our time together. That says so much to your child about how important they are. And I mean, I've had some horrible days where I've been distracted, I've yelled, I've done things I regret, but we come together every night. My oldest is 12. She cherishes talk time. And that is our time. We say, I'm sorry, I could have done better here, or I listen. And it's just such a connective time. And so I love when people say, I want to get started. I say, create that hands-free time and just stick with it.
It's beautiful. And in the moment, and especially in hindsight, the busier and more in demand you are, the more your children will, even, I'm sure, internally somehow just sense that they know you're so busy and yet you take this time. So the profound message, actually, Rachel, to share something that I sometimes share. My parents actually have 6 university degrees. My dad was the research scientist. My mother was the director of the mental health clinic in the town I was from. So, very high-powered jobs. And they were like the first generation of dual income, the mother working. And one of the things that's so sad, because it was not intentional on their part at all, but without realizing it, our needs got just neglected. Like they just didn't flit across their minds, I think, most days. My mother was just, because they also started a full-time farm and moved to a new place. Like, it was just absolute insanity. The lives that they led. So the 4 of us children really did a do-it-yourself childhood, and there's lots to be said for not going there, because it made my parenting start so rough, because I had massive issues to overcome, and not because my parents didn't love me, but because they didn't cherish that time and they didn't know about protecting that time. So your example of saying no to NPR too is just so beautiful, because that pull between all the things we want to do, and yet your daughter already, your oldest, is 12. So
Yeah.
before you know it, you'll be like me. I've got a child. My youngest is 16. She's a
Yes.
sophomore. Like before you know it,
Right.
then we have the rest of our
Exactly.
lives, and we can talk to NPR at 2 in the morning if we want to, right? If they're doing interviews at 2 in the morning, we can do it. So yeah, I just really wanted to acknowledge how profoundly significant that is, and how wonderful it is that you're giving the example of being an extremely busy mama, an extremely in-demand
Mhm.
mama who's still finding the time. So let's talk more about connecting even within that time, and other times people are asking questions about, well, what are some of your recommendations for making that time really precious when you are hands-free?
Yes. One of my very favorite ways of connecting, and I see that Leah asked this question about connecting to the kids when they're young. So I do something called the heartbeat check.
Mm.
And what that means is I lay my head on my child's chest, and we started this. So Avery was 4, so I would say she was pretty young. I laid my head on her chest and I would listen to her heart, and I would interpret the sound of her heartbeat by maybe something that she had done that day. Like I would say, "Oh, your heart is so happy because you swam so fast when you went to the pool." Or to my older daughter, I would say things like, "Wow, your heart sounds so tired. I saw how you were running across the yard so fast." Or, so they loved it because not only did it give us that physical presence and that connection, but it would let them know that I had noticed things about their day, and I would remark about, something special about them. And it was interesting because Avery, the 4-year-old, she was 4 at the time, she said, "Let me listen to your heart, Mama." And so then she would listen to my heart and, talk about what she would hear. And that was really special. And then one day I saw Natalie, my oldest, after we had done it for about a year, she was laying her head on our cat, and I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I'm listening to the sound of his purr. It's like a purr check, instead of a heartbeat check." And I don't know why, but that just gave me such comfort,
Mm.
because the world that we live in right now is so scary. There's just, not only when they go to school, but just the world that we live in. And if you know that you can lay your head on someone's chest and you can listen to your heartbeat and you can feel that sense of peace and calm, I mean, there's just nothing better than to give our children these gifts for how to feel hopeful and peaceful and check out from the noise of the world. So I love the heartbeat check, and probably out of any exercise that's mentioned in my new book, the heartbeat check is number one. I hear people write to me all the time and say, "We started the heartbeat check and it is really transforming our lives."
Mm. So beautiful because it presences everyone too, because then you're
Yes.
really in the moment, and that it's profound even for things like depression, that it's showing that when we're mindful and present, all sorts of things shift. So love, love, love
Yeah.
that. Well, let's talk a
Thank
little
you.
bit, because you already talked about in the morning that being a hands-free time. And I know in your new book you focus a lot on habits and rituals and that. So
Mhm.
let's talk a little bit about rituals in general, and I'd love to hear more about your morning ritual or rituals.
So a ritual, or a habit that I have that I feel is critical to having a peaceful, connected home is the 3-second pause.
Mm.
And I recommend, in any time of chaos, when there's conflict, so like in the morning, the cereal is not good, according to your child, or I can't get this shoelace untied, or I didn't do my homework and now I've got to do it and we have to leave in 5 minutes. I really strongly urge people to not react immediately, but to take a 3-second pause and it just gives you that brief amount of seconds to just look at your child or look at your spouse, if that's who you're having the conflict with, and just see them as a human being who is really not trying to aggravate you, even though it maybe feels like it, but they have a need, and their need is not being met, and they might be crying or yelling or acting atrociously, but if you remain calm and you keep in mind that they have a need and I can fulfill it, we can either do this the hard way, we can blow up, but that's not going to solve any problem that you're having. But simply by listening, and my favorite question to ask in a moment of conflict is, how can I help? I try to stay very calm. If one of my daughters has a lot of trouble picking out what she wants to wear, and if we don't do it the night before, it is going to be chaos in the morning. And I like to ask her, when she's having a meltdown about her clothes, how can I help? And instead of, you should have thought about this last night, that would have been the old Rachel, but the new Rachel says, how can I help? And even though I may not want to go get, her favorite jeans out of the dirty clothes for her, it takes, less than 5 seconds, and it brings peace to that situation. And it works for my spouse too, and it works for when I'm in conflict with a colleague. When we're not seeing eye to eye, and we simply pause for 3 seconds and see them as a human being and not take their behavior personally, we can respond with kindness and compassion, and we can save that moment and possibly save that day. Because you know how it is, if you part on angry terms, you can ruin your whole day. So the 3-second pause is something I really like to use, especially in the morning.
So powerful. One of the things I wanted to point out that is crazy great about your example of going and helping your daughter and getting the jeans that she needs or that would make the difference. We are so concerned as parents because we see children not growing up properly. But as I teach all the time, it's because we don't actually understand that what makes our children mature, so much of it is because of the connection with us. And literally by doing that and by treating your child with such respect that her needs are important and that you're willing to take a moment out of your day and help her, ultimately, in the long run, that is how she continues to want to be like you and model you. So it's so powerful. And I just really wanted to highlight and acknowledge that. So in terms of, you talk about getting up in the morning, and you talk about really having hands-free time first thing in the morning, and then the 3-second pause, which I gather you would do throughout the day at different times. Is there anything else you want to add in terms of some rituals and routines?
Yes. In the morning, we always have a loving goodbye. We call it XOXO, before you go. And that was coined by my daughter, Avery, who played the ukulele at the time. Now she plays the guitar, but she made a little rhyming lyric up because one day I realized we were missing the hugs in the morning. We were missing, because you get so caught up in getting out the door. Well, my daughter, Avery, when I told her, I said, I'm really missing the hugs and the kisses. What can we do about it? She made a little sign that said XOXO before you go. She put it on the garage door, and the next morning we all were scurrying around, getting the backpack, the glasses, the water, the lunches, and Avery said, XOXO before you go. And my older daughter looked at us like, you are weird, why are you talking about that? And I said, oh, well, this is our new thing. We can't leave until we hug and kiss. So I held Avery, and Natalie was standing there, giving us the look. And I said, come on. I need your hug and kiss too. And she kind of came over and she stood up against me, like leaned in And then she took this big breath and went like this. And she breathed in my scent. And I thought, oh my gosh, she has been missing this morning ritual just as much as I have, just as much as Avery has. And so I like to tell people, have your child make a sign, XOXO before you go, because we don't have a guarantee that we are going to see them again, sadly, but sometimes that thought can be motivating. And do we want the last minutes of our day or of our morning to be yelling or saying, why didn't you do this, or why didn't you tell me about your homework, or because we can be in a battle before we go, but always coming to say, oh, we've got to do XOXO before you go, because if it's a habit, even if you're mad at each other, you can say, well, this is what we have to do. This is what we do every morning. And those habits, you can just fall back on them. No matter what happened before that moment, you can have that connection.
Beautiful. And again, that actually builds the alignment overall with your children, because that family ritual is so powerful. This feels like a beautiful time to shift into talking a little bit about how, because I know you're so much about encouraging others as well as encouraging ourselves when we fail.
Yes.
And that people have written in things like, well, what do I do when my child doesn't even want one-on-one time? And it's so easy, if we are in a really tough place with our children, to be hard on ourselves and for it to be really hard to dig our way back out. So what are some of the ways you suggest that we encourage others as well as ourselves?
So just real quickly, if your child doesn't want one-on-one time, I'd love to address that really quickly.
Great, please.
I have learned so much about my children simply by observing them, listening to them, letting them be my guide. And some of the things that I like to do with them are not what they like to do. And so I call it loving them by their book, because everyone, has different likes and interests. And so by observing your child and seeing, what makes them light up, what makes them come alive, those are critical things to notice about your child. And maybe you're offering to give them one-on-one time, and it's something that they don't like to do. So I would suggest perhaps asking them, okay, I've got 10 minutes and they're all yours. What do you want to do? That in itself is a huge gift to your child, because you're saying, I've got time and I'm giving it to you. See what they say. Also, you might just prepare some different things, like where there's not any conversation that's needed, like just put out the ingredients to make cookies and say, I'm making cookies. I need some helpers, or whatever. And I think, even laying out a puzzle, I'm going to try to figure this puzzle out. I think just starting to engage in an activity, and maybe it's one you've noticed they really like to do, and it might even be video games. And as much as we want to be hands-free, our child might love to play Minecraft, and that's okay. And they might love it if you say, I've always wanted to see what the Minecraft world looks like. Can you show me? And if they love Minecraft, they're going to love to show you the Minecraft world. So I would say to that mother, just really pay attention and observe, what does your child love to do, and then see if you can step into that world with your child. And
Fabulous,
then as
Rachel.
far as
I'm really glad you answered that.
No problem. As far as trying to forgive ourselves, every day there's going to be things that we're going to wish we did better. I have those exact same feelings, but what was instrumental to me was to realize, when I spent my time wallowing in regret, beating myself up for something I wish I hadn't done or said, I not only had sabotaged that moment, but I was sabotaging the current moment.
Mm.
And it was so interesting when I did talk to my girls. I was about 2 years into my journey when I really had some severe remorse over what I had missed when they were little. And one day I talked to my older daughter about, I said, I'm so sorry that I always wanted things to be perfect with you. And she said, well, what do you mean, Mommy? Give me an example. And I said, when I was really mean right before we would try to get out the door. I would make your clothes match, and I would comb your hair really fast, and I was very gruff. And she said, well, I don't remember that, Mommy. I just remembered you didn't let me pick out my own clothes, and you do now, and I like it this way. So I thought to myself, I've been beating myself up over the way I would behave when it was time to leave, and she didn't really remember that part about it. So I thought, I need to see myself through the eyes of my children who have forgiven me, and they forgive on a daily basis. And I think it's so powerful to say, I'm so sorry. I really wish I had acted in a nicer way when you told me you didn't have your homework. Or it's okay to go back and say, I've thought about this, and I really wish I had reacted in a different way. It's a gift to give your child the ability for them to say, I'm sorry, and it's okay to fail, because it means you're trying, and you're taking your failures and you're learning from them, and that's all we can ask from ourselves and from each other.
Ah, that's so beautiful. I just love that. I always say I'm a recovering perfectionist, and you just gave such a beautiful example of how that what your daughter remembered was that you changed.
Yes.
And that was the focus for her. I see just huge ramifications for that. So in terms of, there's so many different things I want to touch on, but another one that feels really powerful that you talk about, because would you say that a lot of your parenting has been a journey to get to know yourself better and to kind of understand the world better as well?
I would say that I really did start to listen to myself and be kinder to myself. I have, like you, recovering perfectionist and always trying to please. I realized that there was a little internal bully, I like to say, an inner bully inside me. I mean, I wanted to blame the world for the pressure that I felt on my shoulders, but when it came down to it, it was me. I was the one saying everything needs to be done at 110% level. I was the one who said, you cannot sleep until this is done. So I was putting all this pressure on myself, and I didn't really realize it until I saw what it was doing to my older daughter. And she had spilled a bag of rice one day, and 1,000 tiny grains hit the floor, and she looked up at me with this fear in her face. And I thought, oh my gosh, she's scared of me. She's scared of my reaction because I was so critical to myself. Naturally, I'm going to be critical of my oldest daughter. And so I thought, I don't want to be this mother that my children are afraid of making a mistake because of my reaction. So that was a pivotal moment for me when I realized I was being so critical of myself and my child, and I knew I needed to stop that negative internal dialogue that was constantly saying, you can't go out looking like that, or you can't submit this article, it's not good enough, or why do you think you'll ever be able to do this? That internal bully was sabotaging me from really living fully. And I stopped that negative dialogue with a 3-word phrase that was very powerful for me, and it was only love today. So when I would start to berate myself
Mm.
or tell myself something wasn't good enough, or I felt like I was about to criticize my child or my spouse, I would say, only love today. And I kept repeating that. I mean, sometimes I probably said it 1,000 times because my internal bully was so strong and I needed to silence it. But over the years of the hands-free journey, I have realized it does not pay to be cruel to yourself. It only affects your relationships, your dreams. How can you ever do the things that you dream of doing when you're constantly telling yourself you're not good enough? So my hands-free journey, I learned so much about myself and loving myself that only benefited my family.
Mm. So beautiful, and that answers some of the questions coming in about, how did you stop being critical, because that's such a common problem, and so many of us received that without meaning to. Our parents did the same type of thing to us.
Yes.
But the fact that you advocate these hands-free times where we're present, it seems to me there's so much power in that presence, because if you had been busy in that moment and not even witnessed your daughter looking to you for the reaction about the rice spilling, you would have missed that whole learning, right?
That's a good point. You're absolutely right. Yes. One of my other techniques I call seeing the flowers instead of the weeds.
Mm.
And that was, it's actually one of the habits in my new book, Hands-Free Life. It's called Seeing the Good. Because if you are constantly looking for what is wrong, what's not going right, where that person needs to change or you need to change, you are missing the goodness and the joy. And so when I would walk into the room, I vowed to first notice something positive before I noticed the negative. So my daughter Natalie loves to be creative and crafty, and she is always working on a project, but boy, can she make a mess. Mm-hmm. And so when I would walk into a room, of course, I would always see the mess. And I would always say, well, you're going to clean that up, right? I would not even mention the beautiful project that she had created and that she had taken initiative to do. So there were so many things I could have remarked on, but I chose to remark on the negative part. So that was part of becoming less critical, was to notice the flowers before the weeds, and to see the good. And naturally, we're going to have a lot of setbacks in our day. There's going to be a lot of things that don't go right, especially if you're a parent. But if you can find those glimmers of goodness, those moments where your child smiles at you or says, "I love you, Mom," or hands you some flowers that they picked, or you see a beautiful bird outside your window, those are the moments that will keep you going. And if you don't stop to notice and appreciate them, you really can get into a negative spiral. And for me, I really felt joyless at the most distracted time of my life. And I thought, I've lost my joy. And I become this angry, critical person, and I didn't know why. But part of getting back to being a happy person was to seeing the goodness, even if it was just a moment or a tiny expression. I tried to really hone in on that.
It's so wonderful. I want to highlight again that everything you're saying makes parenting easier, right? Because when you are recognizing the positives and you're in a joyous, grateful, light place, you are dramatically easier to align with, which is the term I like to use for that powerful connection that makes our children want to behave. So it's just huge. And you have fun tips too, right? Because it just makes your life so much more
Yeah.
joyous, as you said. So
Yeah.
one of the questions I'd love to have you answer that's come in is talking about your week going hands-free. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that was like?
Yes. Um, Going hands-free for a whole week was challenging, to say the least. And you probably can't pick a hands-free week maybe at certain times of the year, like, because there's so many things that come in with school, all of it's electronic. But I took my hands-free week when I knew I was not going to need to be communicating with the school or have anything medical that I needed to attend to. So I coincide, usually my hands-free weeks are when we are on vacation, because I sabotaged a lot of vacations by being on my device, not only trying to get, those perfect pictures to post on the internet and think of that clever, comment to go with it, but just every time I would check my email or my phone, I would be pulled away from the moment with my family and into another world. That was not where my family was. So going hands-free for a week during a vacation, it was really amazing what happens when you stop reaching for the phone. There were a lot of silences. Sometimes we would just be sitting there, like my husband and I, after the girls went to bed, we're like, not reaching for our phones. We didn't turn the TV on. So we would end up watching a sunset together. We watched 5 consecutive sunsets, and I couldn't even remember the last time I had seen a sunset. But what happened was we had these silences, but they weren't awkward. I started to call them connective silences because I felt so close to him, because we were just sitting there watching this beautiful scene of nature, and once in a while something would come up. He would think of something or I would think of something, and I thought, wow, every time I reach for the phone or I reach for the remote on the TV, I am taking myself out of a moment that could end up being very connective. So naturally, it is difficult to take a whole week to be hands-free, but even if you do a whole Saturday, it is so rejuvenating. When you turn that phone and that computer off, you can actually be in your own world rather than comparing yourself to the people on the internet. And right now the internet is really a hard place to be, because if they're talking about the tragedies that are going on in the world, it can be very, very you can feel very hopeless. Plus, maybe you don't agree with your friends and they're getting, there's a lot of criticism and attacks going on social media right now, and it can be very just kind of weakening your spirit and making you feel less hopeful. So I would say, I'm already planning for next week to be taking a social media break. I mean, actually an internet break for Thanksgiving. I just want to soak up my family, and I want to soak up the goodness, and I just have a hard time doing that when I'm battling with the online world.
Beautiful, beautiful example. And I just thought, the sunset example, we tend to post about those type of moments, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the
Yes.
irony is we can miss the moments because we're busy posting about it. So let's talk then full on about cell phones, and how do we know, because we're inspired. I mean, you've spread your work and helped so many parents because of the internet. So there's obviously some beautiful things about being able to pick up our phone and connect.
Yes.
But how do we know when it's too much?
Well, for me, early on, it was very helpful for me to write down some red flag behaviors. So there were times when I knew I was farthest from grasping what matters. And so these became my red flag behaviors. When I could not walk by my phone without looking at it, that was a red flag. I had gotten too attached. It became almost like an addiction. So that's a warning. When I get to the point where I am checking my phone constantly, or if I see someone pull their phone out, it makes me want to pull my phone out. That's a good reality check for me. When I'm looking at my phone and I'm being agitated or frustrated when someone's bothering me, I'm looking at Facebook and someone in my family wants my attention and I'm mean to them. That's a red flag. And I got to have a reality check. Like, why are you thinking these people on social media are more important than your family? You need to take a moment and think about this. Another red flag behavior for me is when I lose track of what my boundary lines are. Carrying my phone to the bedroom. I do not bring my phone into the bedroom. I don't bring my computer in the bedroom. But once in a while, I'll get so caught up in something that's going on, with the blog, oh, I have a viral post. I really want to check and see how it's doing. And I bring the phone into the bedroom. That is not serving any purpose for me. In fact, when I do that, I have a bad night of sleep. There were times when I would get up in the night and I would check my phone. That's a huge red flag behavior, at least for me. It could be for other people too. And so I just think asking yourself, when am I farthest from feeling connected to my family or to what matters? What are those moments? And then write them down. And then you can kind of be more aware. I mean, and this doesn't have to do with the phone, but when I find myself eating at the kitchen counter, that's a red flag. I'm not taking care of myself. I'm standing here when I should be sitting and enjoying my food. So all day long, I'm just trying to be aware of what behaviors am I doing that's either sabotaging my ability to fully enjoy life, or it's contributing to a more joyful life. And then I try to keep myself on the side of the more joyful, doing those kind of actions. For me, every day I take a walk. I think about, things I want to write about. I say prayers. I think about what I'm grateful for. That is my rejuvenation time. If I don't get outside and take a walk every day, I feel sad and kind of depressed. It's just a time of rejuvenation. That is when I feel closest to grasping what matters. That's on my list of things I make time to do. And that's what I would recommend for people, is to figure out when they feel the farthest, when they feel the closest, and try to do as much as they can to stay on the positive side.
Fantastic. And so many of those flags, I think, are ones that people will resonate with for sure. Yeah. What about people are asking about, what about, for example, if their partner doesn't want to live a hands-free life and that's just not important to them? Or also, what about having older children who potentially, I'm curious about limits and what to do in situations where maybe you feel you don't have the ability to set limits, because with older teens that can be a hard one sometimes.
I think one of the most powerful things you can do if you have some friction and people who are in opposition of putting down their devices is to live by example. And I have no problem with saying out loud, I am not taking my phone into the restaurant tonight. I really want to have a good conversation. I don't want to worry about what's going on in the world. It's okay if I don't have my phone with me for 45 minutes. Saying that out loud is you're not telling them what to do. Like, let's say your spouse is just not on the bandwagon. You're not telling them what to do, but you're saying, this is what I'm going to do. And then you say why you're doing it and how refreshing it is to not have anyone bothering you when you're having this meal with your family. So that's one thing. Second, I think it's so powerful when we tell about our experiences when we are disconnected. So let's say you take your child for a walk around the block and you leave your phone at home. I would definitely mention anything good that happened during that time to entice your spouse. Say, you know, John just said the most amazing thing to me when we were out walking. I left my phone at home and I was completely present. You ought to try that sometime. It's really an amazing way to hear what's going on in his little head. You know, because what parent doesn't want to hear the beautiful things going on in their child's head, and they might forget. Like, that's the big thing about living hands-free, is it makes this awareness. A lot of times people are not even aware how often they look at the phone, what they're missing. Mm-hmm. And so by bringing that awareness to your spouse, you can say, boy, I'm sure glad I did not look at my phone all day on Saturday because I got this done, and this done. You know, when you put your phone down and you don't look at it for a few hours, not only can you get so much more done because things are not sabotaging, but you can actually be present in your life. As far as teenagers go, I would say have a Saturday when you are going out, maybe you're going on a family outing. I don't think there's anything wrong with just saying, we are not going to use our devices on this trip. We are going to, you know, play a game in the car, or we're going to ask each other 20 questions or something. And if they don't want to participate, that's fine. But I do think even if they're grumbling at you or they're saying this is stupid, they're going to look back on those Saturdays that you say we're not doing devices in the car on this outing. They're going to look back and they're going to say, you know, my family wanted to spend time with me. My mom and dad wanted me to look up for my device. There are plenty of families who don't have these expectations, and they are living separate lives. They're in their own room. Everyone's door is shut. They are not knowing each other. They're not learning to love each other by their book. And if you don't want that to be your future, you do have to be the parent. And you have to say, you know what, on Monday through Friday, you use your device. But you know what, on Saturdays, this is my day with my family, and I want all of you. And I think they're going to deep down feel pretty happy that you love them that much that you want to spend time with them.
Rachel, beautiful. That's a delightful place to end, because what do our children want more than anything else is a sense of being known and important and knowing that they're deeply loved by us. So, Rachel, I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye to you. I've got a couple of housekeeping things because it's the end of the show. I want to announce some things and whatnot, but I know that you need to go. Thank you so much, Rachel. I just am delighted that you shared everything with us today, and I highly recommend to everyone that you go to handsfreemama.com, that you get both of Rachel's books and dive further into her work.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye for now. Thank you, Rachel.
Bye-bye.
Okay. So just to say a couple housekeeping things, yeah, Rachel actually needed to go, so we're not doing a bonus Q&A per se. I am going to leave the chat open. I want you to say one thing that you'll do differently. I know for me, one thing, it occurred to me that I have gotten so reliant, you know, I'm looking down at my phone because, of course, I can easily justify, and I will continue to have it on for live interviews, because right beforehand, sometimes the speakers will call me or whatnot, but just to have more times in my day where my phone is not with me, particularly in the morning. And I don't know if anyone else can relate, but I have a few people I connect with first thing in the morning. And so I was battling a little bit with that, thinking about becoming hands-free. But what I'd like to do in the morning is possibly even just do a touch base and then put my phone aside for the first hour and a half or so, because I think that morning routine is so important. So if you'd share one thing that you will do differently, because that is what I'm going to do differently, is go ahead and say a good morning to a couple people and let them know, or just have it happen that I don't actually respond if they respond for that first hour and a half when I'm getting my day going. Couple announcements. One is we are actually going to do a best of season. We're going to send you a replay, a email about, a survey actually, to ask you which 4 speakers you'd like to have for best of series a week, where I'm also going to just choose a couple myself as well, that I want to share with you just from all the comments and requests that have come in so far this season. And it did not happen until the end of the season, but we did get a group started, and I'm going to leave it. It'll be interesting to see because it's the end of the season, but we do of course have interviews in between seasons as well. So it's just going to be a place for those of you who want to go and comment and connect in between shows. It will be moderated. That's one of the things I took a little time to get a couple moderators established. So to get to the private group, it's going to be a closed group so that it's a confidential place. It's greatparentingShow.com/group, GROUP. So, and Rose, if you'd enter that, that'd be great into the chat. So greatparentingShow.com/group. And as I said, that's a place to comment in between. Antonella and so many others have commented that it would be really nice because you value the support and value the connection that you have here. And so you do have to ask to be added to it, but of course you'll be added to it. Couple last things then. If you haven't already looked at purchasing the whole series, I strongly recommend it, because the repetition of, and whether you choose to print off the transcripts or read them online, you'll read the written transcription of the interviews, the audios, or the videos. I know for me, the immersion in the work is just what finally got things to shift for me. And when at first I was struggling so hard, and those of you, I know people have written in things like, how to get my child to listen to you. Ironically enough, Rachel did share lots of tips, because the more we listen and the more we sink into that present moment where our power is, we'll start responding more proactively to our children, and you'll start getting more answers in the moment. The more you're able to learn ways to keep from being angry, because of course when we're angry, we're in our core brain, we're no longer in our prefrontal cortex, and we actually lose a lot of our wisdom. But the repetition of ideas and getting the chance, because realistically, even though so many of you have been on so many of these live interviews, I know so many of you have been on every single one. The fact of the matter is that it will still be things that just listening to them again, it will sink in a different way. And I'm always floored, because of course I'm on every single interview, and when I listen to interviews again, I will pick up tips either that I forgot or sometimes nuances I missed the first time. So greatparenting.show.com/TY for thank you is where you get access to the GPS Expert Resource Center. And there's actually still one more of the live laser coachings with me, as well as there's a couple webinars that I've done, a couple of my most popular presentation topics I presented by webinar as bonuses for people who purchase that Expert Resource Center. And the replays, as always, will be live this weekend. Great. So basically Friday to Sunday, you will get all the replay information. And I would love at any time in any situation, or sorry, any modality. I was distracted. I looked at a couple of quick questions coming in, but whether or not you want to send emails to support@greatparenting.show.com, whether or not you want to put, I actually just got a joke and I'm going to share it. I just understood what the joke was that I saw in the chat, but whether you want to put it in the Facebook chat once you're part of the group, or even on facebook.com/Great Parenting Show is our main Facebook page, or whether you want to put in the chat right here. I'd love suggestions, because I think for next season we will change the way the replays are done, and we'll probably do them immediately following the interviews, but this time we've done them Friday to Sunday, so feedback on any of that would be great. And yes, the joke in the side was, when is Rose speaking next? And Rose, I love that, because that's actually what I want to, just before thanking each of you for being here, I want to say a heartfelt thank. Rose, if you would like to jump on, it would be great. I'd like to say a heartfelt thanks to Rose. Also to everyone else who's behind, I call you Team GPS. That's Ed, that's Michelle, that's Chris and Andrea, Joanna, and Ellen, and also Janet. We have a number of people who are behind the scenes and have been so helpful. But yeah, Rose, if you want to come on and unmute yourself, and Rose, amongst other things, has twice, when we've had technical difficulties, we had one speaker who said it was totally on her end, but somehow it took 10 minutes for her to get on. And Rose was such a trooper, because public speaking is the #1 fear of most people, and it's just so fantastic that Rose was willing to not only public speak but do it last minute. So go ahead and talk, people.
Sure. I mean, yeah, all you ladies have been great, and my fear of public speaking probably comes very much from having spent the last 6 years of my life around my toddlers, which has greatly reduced my ability to speak to adults. My goodness, I feel like I sound like a child. So I'm on here learning just as much as you are, and thank you to Jacqueline for this amazing opportunity to really just have to show up to these, because sometimes the titles might not look like they speak to me, but indeed, I shut the computer thinking, wow, that was amazing, and I have followed through with every one of the speakers' books, and they're on my list to get to, and I'm just amazed. I'm amazed, and I hope I can continue to be part of this group, which is just great to have. People to share, different, difficult situations that we live through, and try to come out learning more about ourselves, and it's just amazing altogether. Thank you, Jacqueline. Thank you so much, and thank you to all the listeners. And our chat participants here. It's been great.
Fabulous, Rose. And actually, I love that you segued into thanking everyone. Just before doing that, though, I know I saw a number of comments come in from Lauren saying that she's just asking, well, what are our suggestions for parents? My suggestion is to have faith that you can figure this out, because it is the reason why I share some of the craziness that was true for my background, because I want you to know that no matter where you're parenting from, no matter how much of a mess you might feel you are, and how hopeless your situation is, you are not in a hopeless situation. You truly can do it. Keep reaching out to support. We love you here. We support you, and we will continue to bring great parenting interviews to you in between. So if you feel like you could benefit from repetition of ideas, which is what so many of us find critical, by all means check out the Expert Resource Center. But we will also have free interviews in between, and there'll be other things. Join the Facebook group. So again, greatparentingshow.com/group. Is where you find access to that page, and I'll send an email out about that as well. And just keep immersing yourself in the support that you want and you know that you need. And just to mention one other support thing, some people have been talking about doing book studies and that type of thing, and that's one of the things that if you want to air a different interview every week for your group or something like that, that's an option. I've had people approach me about buying the Expert Resource Center and then sharing it. By all means, look at doing something like that. But if you know that you can get there, you will find the resources you need, and we'll support you getting that. So a couple, well, I'll answer one question and then I'm going to say, yeah, you can suggest guests for the show as well. The next formal season will be closer to the spring, but in between we will have probably at least a couple interviews a month. I'm still feeling into that. There'll be some courses that are offered, and blog posts potentially, and lots of different things that we're offering. I also will be opening up the GPS for Parents exclusive membership, which I haven't opened up in almost 2 years now. Really, it is 2 years later this month. So there'll be quite a few different things happening and ways for you to get support. I wanted to end with, oh, I will, though I said I'd answer this one question. We won't be replaying all of the interviews over one weekend. You can certainly ask for something like that. I guess that's, and Rissa, I will assume that that's a request, and I'll think about the logistics of that. What I was so far planning to do is a best of season that next week I'll give you some time to submit what you'd most like to listen to. I didn't want to interfere with people listening to the last 2 fantastic interviews. So I'll give you a chance to give me your top 4, and then I'm also, though, during the Thanksgiving week going to air a couple that I would like to share because of different comments that have come in from people. And yeah, and I will consider that request as well. So, oh, and Lauren, you asked about how much is the Expert Resource Center. It's $97 is the regular price for it. And one of the ways that I look at it, you know, having purchased so many hardcover parenting books, actually the top shelf is just some of the experts from this particular fall series, some of their products. But I have purchased so many books, and if you think 4 hardcover books, 4 or 5 hardcover books is the price of the Expert Resource Center. And of course, I know for so many of us, the audio and the video format is more engaging, but then there is also the written if you prefer to read, and I like all the modalities. So I am going to end with just really acknowledging you. I love each and every one of you, and I really feel heartwarmed constantly that yes, we are in challenging times, and we have times of being reminded of how fragile life is, and how that there is a scary side to modern life for sure. But what you are doing by reaching out for help, by finding the time, no matter how busy you are, to really attune to what your children need and to how to be a better parent, it is how we are being the change that we want to see in the world. And Neil Donald Walsh, we didn't talk about this this time, but Neil Donald Walsh last time talked about how we can change the world in one generation, and unfortunately he was talking about Osama bin Laden and how effectively he has changed the world in one generation. But we as a community within the Great Parenting Show are doing the same thing in the opposite direction. Every person that interacts with your children, let alone you, every person who interacts with you and your children, the thousands of people who that ricochets out, you know, the way you treat your children, and every attempt and success you have with learning how to parent from a more conscious, loving, proactive place, that is how we change the world. That is how we shift what's happening right now in the world that we don't like and get more of what we do like. So hats off to you. Much love, much respect to you. And until next time, here's to great parenting.